Most sailors over 55 don't need a bigger boat. They need a smarter one. That's a distinction the market rarely makes clearly, and it's one that costs people real money and real comfort when they get it wrong. The assumption is that more length solves the problem, or more horsepower, or a more modern profile. But after a few passages, after a few weeks actually living aboard, what starts to matter is something more specific. Headroom that doesn't punish you every time you stand up. A pilot house that keeps you out of the weather without cutting you off from what's happening outside. A layout that makes sense not just for a weekend, but for weeks at a time, offshore, in real conditions. Motorsailers are the honest answer to that question for a lot of sailors. Not a compromise, a deliberate choice. Protection, range, comfort, and enough sail to make use of the wind when it's there. But not all of them are built with the same priorities. Some look right from the dock and disappoint below. Some have the bones but not the finish. And some just weren't designed with long-term livability in mind. These 5 were. Let me walk through them honestly. The Beneteau Evasion 36 is an unusual boat in Beneteau's history, and most people who haven't been aboard one tend to underestimate it. On paper, it reads as a compact cruiser. Step inside and the picture changes quickly. The interior uses a split-level layout that achieves something you rarely find on a boat this size. Genuine 360-degree visibility from inside. Large windows run around the pilot house and saloon. Natural light fills the space. It doesn't feel like you're living in a hull. It feels open, and that matters more over time than most buyers initially account for. The helm position is elevated slightly, with the galley and nav station just below. The flow is logical. You're not climbing over things or squeezing past furniture to move from one area to another. From the saloon, you can monitor conditions outside without going on deck. For a solo sailor managing everything alone, that's a practical advantage, not a luxury. Accommodation is split between a forward V-berth and a proper aft cabin under the cockpit. Both are usable. The headroom comes in around 6'2", which means movement below feels natural rather than hunched. The cockpit is well protected, the handrails are solid. The maintenance surfaces are practical rather than ornamental. What the Evasion 36 does well is make everything feel less effortful. That's not a small thing. On a long passage, fatigue is cumulative. A boat that works with you rather than against you adds up over days and weeks in ways that are hard to fully appreciate until you've experienced the alternative. The Fisher 30 is a different philosophy entirely, and it's worth understanding what that philosophy actually means in practice. This is a boat built in the 1970s with a clear set of priorities. Go anywhere, live aboard fully, protect the crew from whatever the sea delivers. It does all 3, and it does them without pretending to be something it isn't. The pilot house is the defining feature, enclosed, panoramic, solid. You are not standing exposed at a wheel in a North Atlantic chop. You are seated inside a protected space with full visibility around you. That changes the experience of passage making at a fundamental level. It removes the attrition. The cold, the spray, the constant physical effort of staying upright on an open deck. The Fisher absorbs all of that. Below, the headroom is slightly over 6'2". For a 30-foot boat, that number is significant. It means the Fisher doesn't feel like a 30-footer below. The main cabin has an L-shaped saloon, a practical galley, and a proper enclosed head. Not generous by current standards, but well organized and built with quality that has held up for decades. The interior woodwork is traditional, solid teak, warm, not clinical. It reads as craftsmanship from an era when boat builders used materials that lasted because that was the expectation. If you've spent time on modern production boats with their laminates and lightweight panels, stepping into a Fisher 30 cabin feels noticeably different. more substantial, more settled. For solo offshore work, the Fisher's proportions and structural integrity make it genuinely trustworthy. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it goes where you point it and keeps you comfortable doing it. For a lot of experienced sailors, that's the correct trade-off. The Nautica 331 takes the pilot house concept and pushes it further than most Motorsailers attempt. On most boats in this category, the pilot house is a protected steering area. On the Nautica, it becomes the primary living space. The main seating, the helm, the connection to the horizon, all of it is elevated into the upper level. You're living up, not buried below. For anyone who has spent extended time on a traditional layout, the difference in daily comfort is real. The layout separates sleeping accommodation at each end of the boat, forward cabin and aft cabin, connected through the pilot house level. The aft cabin in particular is properly proportioned, private, spacious, and genuinely suitable for extended use, even when there's another person aboard. There's a second dining area near the galley below, which gives you options depending on conditions. Rough weather or cold days, you retreat to the sheltered lower level. Fair conditions, you live upstairs. Headroom in the pilot house is around 6'3". Finnish build quality. Nautica is a Scandinavian manufacturer with a long offshore reputation. Means the construction is honest and durable. The woodwork is satin finished, clean, well detailed without being overdone. It doesn't perform luxury, it just delivers it quietly. The Nautica 331 is the kind of boat that takes a few days aboard to fully appreciate. The layout rewards long-term use more than it impresses on a quick tour. That's often the mark of a well-designed cruising boat. The Motiva 39DS is less well known than the others on this list, and that's worth addressing directly because the boat deserves more attention than it typically gets. Built in Northern Europe to handle serious conditions, the North Sea is not a forgiving testing ground. The Motiva combines structural confidence with a deck saloon layout that keeps you connected to the outside without exposing you to it. The pilot house isn't decorative. It's a proper command position, solid in rough weather, clear in all directions. The interior organization is notable. The deck saloon contains a U-shaped seating area, a navigation table, and an interior helm station, all integrated into one zone. You manage the boat from inside, surrounded by what you need, always aware of conditions outside without being subjected to them. Below, a secondary dinette near the galley gives you a more enclosed option for rougher days. The center cockpit configuration is a genuine advantage here. It creates a natural separation between the cockpit and the aft cabin, which becomes a proper private suite. For extended offshore passages or for sailing with a partner, that separation matters. Privacy aboard a 40-foot boat is often theoretical. On the Motiva, it's actual. The boat was designed for people who don't want to compromise between capability and comfort. It's heavier, more purposeful, and less likely to impress someone looking for a glamorous profile. But offshore, those qualities are assets. Heavy displacement smooths the motion, solid construction absorbs the miles, and a well-organized interior reduces the fatigue that accumulates over a long passage. The Moody Carboneer 44 is the largest boat on this list, and it's the one that sets a different kind of benchmark. Designed under the influence of Laurent Giles, one of the more respected names in serious yacht design, the Carboneer 44 was built for people who wanted ocean capability without giving up the quality of life they had ashore. That sounds like a marketing line. In this case, it describes the boat accurately. At 44 feet, the dimensions allow for things that smaller Motorsailers can only approximate. The aft cabin is a full owner's stateroom, double berth with access from both sides, a dressing area, proper storage, and an ensuite bathroom. Not a curtained-off corner, a real private space. For anyone who has lived on a smaller boat and managed the constant choreography of sharing confined quarters, that distinction is significant. The separation between working and living spaces is clear. The saloon is the social area. The pilot house handles navigation and sailing. The aft cabin is private. These zones don't overlap and compromise each other, the way they often do on boats where the designer was working with less room to work with. The galley is set slightly below the saloon level, large enough for full-size equipment, properly ventilated, and organized for extended offshore use rather than day-trip cooking. Heavy displacement means the Carbineer's motion offshore is damped and steady. Combined with the protected helm position, it makes long passages significantly less physically demanding than an equivalent lightweight design. For solo work at 60, that matters. Fatigue management is as important as seamanship at that point. 5 boats, 5 different interpretations of the same problem. How do you design a motorsailor that works for experienced sailors who want to cruise seriously, live well aboard, and not spend every passage fighting the boat or the conditions? What these 5 share is a commitment to interior practicality over marina aesthetics. Pilot houses that do real work. Layouts that survive extended use. Headroom that acknowledges how people actually move. Accommodation that allows rest rather than just sleep. The Evasion 36 gives you light and visibility in a compact package. The Fisher 30 gives you traditional offshore confidence. The Nauticat 331 elevates your living space above the waterline in a way that changes the daily experience. The Motiva 39DS builds in structural seriousness for sailors who take conditions seriously. And the Carbineer 44 shows what happens when scale and design quality come together without compromise. None of them is perfect for every situation. All of them are worth knowing. If you've owned any of these or spent real time aboard one, passage making, not just a weekend at anchor, I'd like to hear your assessment. Where the layout held up, where it didn't, what you'd change and what you'd keep. That's where these discussions get useful. And if you want more practical, direct content on motorsailers, cruising decisions, and what actually holds up in real offshore use, rather than what looks good in a brochure, subscribe. That's what this channel is about.